In a world obsessed with sleek designs, glowing displays, and minimalist perfection, it is easy to assume great sound must look beautiful. But what if some of the best sounding amplifiers ever made are actually ugly? Not just a little outdated, truly awkward, strange, even industrial looking machines that would fail every living room vote. Today we are counting down 12 of them. Proof that in audio it is not about looks, it is about soul. Let's begin. 12. Crown DC 300A, the broadcast slab. The Crown DC 300A looks less like a home amplifier and more like something pulled straight out of a broadcast rack or a military lab. No charm, no elegance. Just a cold industrial slab of metal with handles, rack ears, black faceplate, and the kind of utilitarian face only a stage tech or studio engineer could love. It sits there like equipment that was never meant to be seen by the living room crowd. Released in the late 1960s, this was one of the first high-power solid-state amplifiers the professional world actually trusted. Typical continuous rating sits around 150 watts per channel into 8 ohms, with substantially more available into 4 ohms when the load demands it. Crown's IOC, input-output comparator, warning light was a practical feature, not a gimmick. It lit up the moment the amplifier was about to leave its clean operating zone, giving the operator a clear signal before distortion took over. It was not built for aesthetics. It was built to work relentlessly, night after night, in recording studios, theaters, and on the road where reliability mattered more than chrome. The moment you hear a healthy DC 300A, the industrial exterior stops mattering. Bass is tight and disciplined, with a sense of grip that keeps large woofers under control rather than letting them bloom or wander. Mids are clear and uncolored, no extra warmth, no romantic haze, just the recording presented without apology. Highs stay stable even when the music gets dense or the volume climbs. There is a sense of control that feels almost surgical, as if the amplifier remains completely unfazed no matter what transient or load you throw at it. It does not romanticize music, it reveals it. That same philosophy is why these units still turn up in serious systems decades later. Many modern amplifiers measure cleaner on paper or run cooler, yet struggle to match the raw authority and long-term durability of a properly maintained DC 300A. It will never win a beauty contest, it was never supposed to. The DC 300A proves that real performance does not need to look pretty, it only needs to keep working when everything else has already given up. 11. Phase linear, 700, 350 watts of 70s, XS. If the Crown is a lab instrument, the phase linear 700 is a muscle car that forgot to get dressed. Bob Carver's 1970 monster was rated at 350 watts per channel into 8 ohms with later series. 2 versions pushing the continuous rating higher still and offering even more dynamic headroom. The chassis is enormous by living room standards. The styling is awkward, big analog meters that look like they belong on a power station, a front panel that never quite decided whether it wanted to be professional or domestic, and a physical presence that dominates any rack it occupies. Early examples earned the unflattering nickname flame linear, because the output transistors could go up in smoke if the amp was pushed hard into difficult loads or if the protection circuitry was not up to the moment. That reputation is part of the legend, and it is not entirely unfair. These amplifiers demand attention, a full service of the power supply, careful checking of the protection circuits, and speakers that can actually use the current. But when a healthy phase linear 700 is driving big, efficient speakers, the sound explains why people still chase them. Headroom is the whole point. Transients arrive without the amp running out of breath. Dynamic peaks that fold or compress on smaller amplifiers stay upright and explosive. There is a kind of reckless, almost reckless authority here. Not the most refined or polite presentation on this list, yet one that modern Class D bricks rarely bother to imitate because they are optimized for efficiency and heat rather than sheer unrestrained reserve. You do not buy a phase linear 700 because it is pretty. You buy it because in the early 1970s, this was one of the most powerful amplifiers available for home use, and that feeling of unlimited headroom still gets under your skin. It is excess made audible, heavy, hot when working hard, visually unapologetic, and capable of making large speakers wake up in a way few contemporary designs attempt. The ugly chassis is simply the price of admission to that particular kind of power. 10. Leak Stereo 2010 special watts. Set a Leak Stereo 20 on a shelf and it almost disappears. Small, rectangular, no attempt at drama. Transformers sit exposed on top like afterthoughts. The chassis is plain metal, and the overall impression is of something built to work rather than to be admired. That understatement is exactly why the amplifier still surprises people who only know modern high-end jewelry. Harold Leake's late 1950s design runs a pair of EL84 tubes per channel and delivers roughly 10 to 12 real watts. On paper, the number looks almost apologetic. In a room with sensitive speakers, those watts behave differently. The mid-range opens with a natural bloom that makes voices feel close and present, as if the singer stepped a little nearer to the microphone. Strings keep their wooden body and the slight rasp of bow on string instead of being polished into something glossy. Bass is not thunderous, yet it has enough weight and timing to keep the music grounded without the soft blur that some small tube amps fall into. What the Stereo 20 refuses to do is shout. It never tries to sound bigger than it is. Instead, it invites long, unhurried listening. You notice the space around instruments more than the edges of the frequency response. Modern amplifiers often chase the last fraction of measured neutrality. This one trades a little of that absolute precision for a continuous sense of flow. Pair it with high-efficiency horns or classic British monitors, and the modest power rating stops feeling like a limitation. It becomes a deliberate choice. Enough energy to fill the room, and enough character to make ordinary records feel personal again. The chassis may look like a workshop leftover. The music that comes out of it still explains why collectors keep restoring these little boxes, 60 years on. 9. Dynaco Stereo 70 unfinished on purpose. Open the cage on a Dynaco Stereo 70, and the first reaction is often mild disbelief. Tubes stand in plain view, wiring is visible, the transformers are functional rather than decorative, and the whole assembly looks like it could have been finished on a kitchen table. In many cases it was. David Hafler sold the ST70 both as a complete unit and as a kit, deliberately placing serious tube power within reach of people who could not afford the glamorous brands of the late 1950s. 35 watts per channel from EL34S is the official figure. The real story is how those watts are used. Bass arrives with a gentle roundness rather than iron control. It is satisfying rather than surgical. The mid-range carries the main emotional weight, lush without becoming syrupy, expressive without the exaggerated bloom that turns every recording into the same warm soup. High frequencies stay smooth and slightly sweet, the kind of top end that lets you play records for hours without the fatigue that brighter solid-state designs sometimes produce. Because so many ST70S left the factory, or the kit bench, they became the default tube amplifier for a generation of listeners. That volume of production also means many have been rebuilt, retubed, and modified over the decades. Some owners chase the original circuit, others experiment with different coupling capacitors or bias schemes. The core character usually survives, an amplifier that prioritizes musical enjoyment over laboratory perfection. It does not announce itself with drama on the first track. It settles in over the course of an album, making familiar recordings feel a little more human and a little less like documents. The unfinished look was never a flaw, it was the point. Hafler stripped away the chrome and the mythology so ordinary listeners could own the sound. 60 years later, the same modest chassis still does exactly that. 8. Carver M400, the cube that should not work. The Carver M400 looks like a design error that somehow escaped the factory. A compact black cube, barely larger than a stack of records, with almost nothing on the front panel to suggest serious intent. No meters, no dramatic heat sinks, no chrome, just a small, slightly anonymous box that most people would assume was a power supply or a forgotten accessory. Inside that unlikely chassis sits Bob Carver's magnetic field amplifier, a late 1970s experiment in switching power supply design that allowed roughly 200 watts per channel from a package most conventional amplifiers of the era could not match for size. The engineering was clever rather than brute force. Instead of a massive transformer and banks of filter capacitors, Carver used a high-frequency approach that kept weight and bulk down while still delivering real current when the music demanded it. What reaches the speakers is immediate and energetic. Bass arrives with a sharp attack that feels larger than the box should allow. Mid-range stays clear and forward enough to keep voices and instruments present without hardness. Highs remain crisp yet controlled, avoiding the brittle edge that some early high-power solid-state designs produced. The overall impression is of motion music that feels lively and slightly restless, rather than polished into stillness. Collectors still argue about reliability and the need for careful servicing, yet a healthy M400 continues to surprise listeners who expect little from such a modest exterior. It remains one of the clearest demonstrations that clever circuitry can sometimes outperform simple mass. The Cube should not work this well. The fact that it does is exactly why people still hunt for clean examples. 7. Yamaha B6, the Black Pyramid. The Yamaha B6 refuses every conventional idea of how a power amplifier should look. Its pyramidal, almost truncated form sits low and wide, finished in plain black, more like a piece of laboratory apparatus than domestic hi-fi. Place it next to a traditional rectangular amplifier, and it immediately looks like it belongs to a different conversation. Released around 1980, the B6 delivered 200 watts per channel using Yamaha's X power supply, a phase angle control system that adjusted the power delivery according to demand. The approach shared conceptual DNA with some of Bob Carver's efficiency ideas, though the execution and the resulting character were Yamaha's own. This is not the celebrated VFET B2. The B6 was a different experiment aimed at high power with reduced heat and bulk. In use, the amplifier sounds composed rather than dramatic. Bass is firm and well controlled without the exaggerated weight some high power designs add. The mid-range stays smooth and naturally balanced, neither recessed nor pushed forward. High frequencies open up cleanly without the sharp edge that can turn long sessions into endurance tests. What stands out is the lack of strain. The music simply continues, effortless and unforced, even when the volume rises. Owners often mention the visual double take the B6 still provokes. Guests ask what it is before they ask how it sounds. Once the music starts, the strange shape becomes secondary to a presentation that feels quietly confident rather than showy. It is an amplifier that prioritizes balance over spectacle, wrapped in a chassis that never tries to blend in. 6. Quad 303, the gray box that never gets tired. The Quad 303 is the opposite of visual theater. A simple gray metal box, modest in size, free of meters, lights, or decorative flourishes. It looks like something designed to disappear into a cabinet rather than dominate a room. Many people walk past it without a second glance. Peter Walker's late 1960s design used a current dumping output stage that combined a small Class A section with a more powerful Class B section, aiming for low distortion and stable behavior without the heat and complexity of pure Class A. Rated at around 45 watts per channel, the 303 was never about overwhelming force. It was about accuracy that did not fatigue the listener. The sonic result is calm and coherent. Bass remains clean and orderly, supporting the music without drawing attention to itself. The mid-range is honest and uncolored, letting voices and acoustic instruments retain their natural timbre. High frequencies are detailed yet gentle, avoiding the brightness that can make lesser solid-state amplifiers tiring over time. Nothing is exaggerated, nothing feels missing. The music simply occupies the room in a balanced, unforced way. That long-term comfort is the 303's quiet strength. It is the amplifier you can leave playing for an entire evening without the sense that the system is working too hard or pushing detail at the expense of ease. Modern designs often chase higher resolution and tighter control. The Quad offers a different virtue, the ability to sound right for hours at a stretch. The gray box may look ordinary, the listening experience it provides is anything but. 5. Hafler DH-200, the kit that embarrassed expensive amps. The Hafler DH-200 is another black rectangle that would vanish on a warehouse shelf. David Hafler, after Dynaco, gave the world a MOSFET power amp you could buy assembled or build from a kit. 100 watts per channel, about 26 pounds, and a face so plain it almost dares you to ignore it. People who built these for Christmas in the early 80s still talk about them the way other people talk about first cars. The sound is clean, quick, and surprisingly powerful for the money it cost new. Bass is firm, the mid-range stays out of the way. It does not have the romance of the leak or the heat of a classic Krell, and that is the point. It was honest power for people who wanted to hear the recording, not the jewelry. A well-sorted DH-200 still embarrasses a lot of modern mid-fi that costs more and looks better in photographs. Ugly, yes. Underestimated, always. 4. Naim Nait 1, the toy that keeps time. The Naim Nait 1 looks almost toy-like. Small, minimal, completely lacking the visual impact you expect from serious audio gear. This little early 80s integrated has a big personality. It focuses less on power, roughly 15 to 20 watts, and more on timing, rhythm, and musical engagement. The things many amplifiers still struggle to get right. The sound is fast, punchy, and incredibly alive. Bass is tight, mids are expressive, everything feels rhythmically connected, as if the music is moving with intention. You do not just hear the song, you feel it. It is not about a massive soundstage or extreme detail, it is about energy, flow, and involvement. Once you experience that, it is hard to go back. Modern amplifiers often sound bigger. The Nait one sounds more alive. It may look small and unimpressive. It delivers something many bigger systems cannot. Pure musical joy. 3. Musical Fidelity A1, the hot black brick. The original musical Fidelity A1 looks tired. A simple black box with almost no visual excitement and a reputation for running incredibly hot. Behind that plain exterior is something special. Released in the 1980s, the A1 is a pure Class A, integrated of about 20 watts, and you hear that instantly. The sound is warm, smooth, and beautifully fluid. Bass is soft but natural. Mids are rich and expressive. Highs glide without harshness. There is intimacy, as if the music is closer and more personal. It does not push detail aggressively, it invites you in. That is what makes it addictive. Yes, it gets hot. Yes, it looks basic. When the music starts, none of that matters. Many modern amplifiers are cleaner on paper. Few feel this emotional, it may not impress your eyes, it wins your ears. 2. Krell KSA-50 ugly on purpose. The Krell KSA-50 is not just ugly, it is intimidating. A massive heavy block of metal with sharp edges and zero interest in looking friendly. That is exactly the point. Released in the early 1980s, this pure Class A amplifier was built for absolute performance, no compromises. 50 watts that run hot enough to heat a small room, and a chassis that feels like industrial equipment, because that is how Dan D'Agostino thought serious amplification should feel. What you get is extraordinary control. Bass is deep, tight, and commanding. The mid-range is clean and revealing. Highs are extended, detailed, and brutally honest. This amplifier does not soften anything. It tells the truth, every detail, every flaw, every strength. It demands great speakers, great recordings, and your full attention. When everything aligns, it is breathtaking. Modern amplifiers often try to balance everything. The KSA-50 chooses dominance. It may look like a weapon. What it delivers is high-end authority without a smile. 1. NAD 3020, the legend in a dull gray box. The NAD 3020 is the definition of underwhelming design. A dull gray box, basic controls, and absolutely no attempt to look premium. And yet it changed everything. Released in the late 1970s, it became one of the most famous amplifiers in history. Not because of power, about 20 watts on paper, with a soft clipping circuit that made it play louder than the number suggested, but because of how it felt. On paper, it does not seem impressive. The moment you listen, you understand. The sound is warm, punchy, and incredibly engaging. Bass has real weight, mids are smooth and inviting. The whole presentation feels musical, fun, and alive. It does not try to be perfect, it tries to be enjoyable, and it succeeds. More importantly, it proved that great sound does not need to be expensive, complicated, or beautiful. Even today, many modern amplifiers still chase the balance the 3020 achieved decades ago. It may look cheap, it sounds like something far more valuable. This is not just an amplifier, it is a legend. These ugly vintage amplifiers prove something powerful. Great sound has nothing to do with appearance. Long before modern design trends and digital perfection, engineers focused on what truly mattered, how music feels. That is why these machines still stand. A crown that looks like a rack panel, a phase linear that looks like a power plant, a leak that looks like a lunchbox, a cube, a pyramid, a kit, a toy, a hot brick, a gray NAD. They may not look impressive on the outside. Inside they carry character, emotion, and soul that many modern systems struggle to replicate. Your ears do not care how something looks. They care how it makes you feel. Which one would you actually live with? Drop it in the comments. Hit like and subscribe for more from Audio Legends. The pretty stuff can wait. The ugly stuff still sings.